Busan, Korea, located in the southeast corner of the country, is the second most populous city in South Korea after Seoul. It is a port city with a formidable presence, being the fifth busiest in the world. You'll also find Busan to be one of the most popular destinations for international conferences in Korea, if not in all of Asia. It was also one of the first cities originally hit by COVID-19. If you remember way back, about a month ago, Korea appeared to be on a trajectory to overtake China and become the epicenter of the disease. However, the government seems to have taken steps to really slow down the virus. Today, we speak with a Canadian expat living in this amazing city. Our guest today is Stefan Raymond. He moved to South Korea 9 years ago from Ottawa and is currently living in the lockdown experience in Busan. Stefan, welcome to the Canadian Expat.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Before we get into Busan under quarantine, Stefan, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background and what brought you to Korea?
Sure. I've been living in Busan, South Korea since June of 2011, so almost 9 years now. I originally moved here a little bit on a whim. I love traveling, I love adventure, and I decided to move here on the recommendation of a friend of mine who had already been living here for about 2 years. And so I had finished my undergraduate degree in law and human rights. I was in the midst of pursuing a graduate degree, put it on hold, thought I would try something, moved here, fell in love with this beautiful city, and, I'm still here today.
So what are you doing in Korea? Are you working within education, or what is your...
Yes. Yeah, I work within EFL education. So basically all ages. I've had the opportunity to work with everything from kindergarten students all the way up to young adults and young professionals just beginning their careers. And the variety has been really amazing and just allowed me to experience more in terms of education. And these days I'm actually pursuing my master's in education online.
Congratulations. Is that through a Canadian university?
It's actually through an American university based out of California.
So moving to COVID-19, now you've been living in Korea through the thick of it when things really got heated up, if you will. Can you give us a sense of what it's like going through that?
Well, at first it was quite scary because we were the first country outside of China to really see a spike in numbers. And so it was very untested waters. And there wasn't a lot of information out there because the information that existed was out of China. And so it was limited. A lot of people considered it suspicious. There was just not a lot to go on. And so, it was tough at first, and just not knowing what was going to happen next and just watching those numbers climb and climb and climb. And that was mid to late February. At the end of February, they started shutting down, universities and schools and just all of these postponements of things. And then, we continued to see those numbers rising. And that's when people just kind of went indoors. There was no more hustle and bustle of city life. People just naturally did it. It didn't even really require a government order in the same way it has in, Europe and North America. It was just people did it on their own. They knew that this was a danger. They knew that this was a threat, and they stayed home. And so for quite a few weeks, the public life just kind of disappeared. You didn't see many cars on the streets. Shops were either closed or, the restaurants or cafes that stayed open were very, very empty. Subway was just a ghost town. I've continued to work across the city through this, and taking the subway during rush hour where normally it would be shoulder to shoulder packed in. You end up with 2 or 3 people in a subway car. in the early days of this. And so since then, and I would say in the past couple of weeks, things have slowly started to return to how things were previously, though there is a strong message from the government now to maintain social distancing. I know the mayor of Seoul, for example, just shut down bars and nightclubs and things like that for the next couple of weeks. So yeah, it's a mixed bag now.
So I'm curious, during that time where things started to get really heated up, did you consider moving back to Canada at any time?
I mean, the thought crossed my mind in the very, very early days. And then it was just kind of no, because I looked at how Korea was handling this, and I was just so impressed even from the get-go. I wrote for my own personal blog an article titled, why I'm not going to just come home, because I saw this message from a lot of people, not specifically from my family, but from the families of a lot of friends of mine here within the community, and their family members specifically in Canada and the US were saying, just come home, just come home, just come home. And I had no desire to do that because the medical system here was on top of things. The government was on top of things. For people with symptoms or travel abroad, there was free testing. And so I felt very secure here, as secure as you can anywhere with this sort of thing happening. And I made that decision early on that no, I'm going to stay put. I'm going to ride it out here. And I'm quite happy that I did that.
In the last little while, I've spoken to some people that have actually repatriated from areas in Asia and Europe as things were really starting to get heated up. And some of them have actually expressed regret that they've done that. They wish that they had stuck it out in the country that they left.
Right. Yeah. I know some people, some Americans and Canadians that went back to North America. And that's a personal choice that everybody had to make. And I feel that, their choice was probably right for them, especially at the time. And they did the best that they could with the information that they had. And things were definitely scary here. There was a lot of unpredictability, uncertainty, and we just didn't know how widespread this was going to be or the impact that it was going to have. And as expats in Korea, we have, unless you're fluent in the language, there's definitely a barrier to obtaining that information. So it's really easy to go down a spiral of very specific information that is very doom and gloom, and not really realize what the government or the authorities are doing for us.
In that vein, do you find that there is a bit of a support system within the expat community in Busan?
I think within the community, it's been varying from group to group. So I can only kind of speak of my personal experience with that. And what we've tried to do amongst myself and my groups of friends is really check in on each other, send messages. When people are posting, especially distressed messages on social media, those sorts of things, and just checking in and saying like, hey, how's it going? How's that mental health? And also just keeping those lines of communication open with each other. And so I've received quite a few of those messages from folks. I know I sent quite a few of those. And so within that vein, it's been quite supportive. A lot of folks are kind of down on their luck because a lot of work has been canceled, or people are suffering financially, and so there's been offers from one person to another. Hey, I'll help you out. You've got to pay rent, or you got to buy food, things like that. So it has been a very kind of unofficial, just community grassroots reaching out, people being people and supporting each other within the community.
So is there a feeling of hope now? Maybe, we're starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel. Is there a feeling that maybe things are going to get better, or are people still very concerned about the way things are being handled?
I would say it's really, really split. So within Korea, we've not had a ton of domestic cases. A lot of our numbers that we're reporting are imported. So they're coming in through the airports. And so that has created, I think, a lot of optimism, not just in the expat community, but within Korean society as a whole. And it's kind of spurred people to start opening up their stores again, to start going to events, and just resume, life before the virus sort of thing. Within the expat community itself, I find that there's a really big divide on that. A lot of people are very, in my opinion, heavily influenced by media messages coming from the West that are very, severe lockdown situations, which is not what we're experiencing here in Korea. We still have complete freedom of movement. We're not going to be stopped by police or military when we're outside. We're not going to be harassed for not being 6 feet apart from each other. We just go about our life regularly. Most people wear a mask. It's pretty simple. But there is a group of people that I think have imported that fear and uncertainty from the West, which is a good 4 or more weeks behind us in terms of, dealing with this virus. And so there are a lot of folks saying, we just have to stay home and we have to social distance. And they're becoming quite critical of anything that, or anyone that doesn't kind of adhere to that philosophy. And so it has created, I think, a bit of a divide. And I was there at one point in time, maybe about 2-3 weeks ago myself. I was kind of feeding into that personally. And now I'm just trying to relax a lot more.
Stefan, thank you very much for taking the time to be with us today. It's really encouraging to see how you've been handling things. I think it's important for the community as a whole to really feed on each other and really try to learn from what we're doing as we go through this together. Once again, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me on the show. It's been great to share my experience.
For all those watching, thank you so much for joining us. If you've liked this, please hit that like button. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please do. Until next time.